auctioneer's voice cracked across the market square. "Half the price of a steer, gentlemen. She's useless for babies, but she can work." Mabel's father shoved her forward, 22 years old, and she was livestock. The crowd laughed. Then a silent man with calloused hands stepped from the shadows and paid without a word. "She won't be judged anymore," he said. Mabel's knees buckled. Was this mercy, or had she just been bought by someone worse? Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and stay until the very end. Comment below with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far Mabel's story travels. The rope wasn't real. Mabel kept telling herself that as her father's fingers dug into her arm, dragging her through Millbrook's dirt roads toward the market square. But the pain was real. The humiliation was real. And in about 5 minutes, she'd be standing on an auction block next to the cattle. "Walk faster," she stumbled. Her boot caught on a stone. "I said faster." He yanked her upright. Her shoulder popped. She bit down on her tongue until she tasted copper. Behind them, her mother walked in silence. Margaret Barnes hadn't spoken to Mabel in 3 months. Not since the doctor confirmed what everyone already whispered. Barren. The word had killed everything. Her engagement, her reputation, her place at the dinner table. "You're a curse," her father had said the night Thomas broke off their engagement. "Can't even do the one thing a woman's built for." Now he was doing something about it. The market square crawled with Saturday morning chaos. Farmers argued over pigs. Wives haggled for fabric. Children chased chickens between stalls. Normal people living normal lives. Mabel was about to become entertainment. "Samuel Barnes, what in God's name are you doing?" Mrs. Fletcher stood frozen, her basket of rolls tilted sideways. Her eyes locked on Mabel's face, then dropped to the leather satchel clutched against her chest. "Minding my business, Constance." Samuel pushed past her. "You should try it. You can't mean to—" "I can do whatever I want with what's mine." Mrs. Fletcher's mouth opened, closed, opened again, but no sound came out. She just watched Mabel pass, horror written across her face like a wanted poster. Mabel wanted to scream, wanted to drop to her knees and beg someone, anyone, to stop this. But what could she say? "Please don't let him sell me. The law wouldn't care. She was his daughter, his property. He could auction her off like a broken plow and no one would lift a finger." The auctioneer stood on a raised platform near the livestock pens. Pritchard, a wiry man with a voice like grinding glass, was in the middle of selling a mare when Samuel approached. "Need a word." Pritchard finished his sale, pocketed the coins, then turned. His eyebrows climbed when he saw Mabel. "Samuel, I didn't know you had livestock today." "I don't." Samuel shoved Mabel onto the platform. "I got something better." The wood was splintered under her feet, stained with manure. She stared at the pine trees on the horizon and tried to disappear into the air itself. Conversations died across the square. Heads turned. Pritchard cleared his throat. "Samuel, this is your daughter, and she's useless to me. Can't bear children. Husband ran off the day he found out. But she's young, strong enough. She can cook and clean. Someone'll want her." The murmur that swept through the crowd wasn't shock. It was amusement. Mabel's vision blurred. Her hands shook so hard the satchel slipped. She caught it. Barely. "Well," Pritchard said slowly, "if you're determined to, just get on with it before I drown her instead." The words hit like a fist. Mabel flinched. He'd never said it that plainly before, but she'd known. She'd felt the weight of his hatred every day for 3 months, like a stone tied around her neck, pulling her under. Pritchard raised his voice. "Folks got something unusual. Samuel Barnes is offering his daughter Mabel for household service. She's 22, healthy, and she's barren," Samuel shouted. "Can't give you babies, but she can work half the price of a good steer, and I'll throw in her grandmother's locket." He ripped it from her neck. The chain snapped. Mabel grabbed for it. "No." He held it up like a trophy. The crowd roared with laughter. "Look at that. Barnes is so desperate he's selling defective goods. Maybe she's cursed. That's why she's broken." I heard Thomas fled town the day he found out. Smart man, Mabel's legs wobbled. She locked her knees. If she fell now, she'd never get up. She'd just lie there in the dirt until someone swept her away with the manure. Do I hear $20? Pritchard called. Silence. 15. A man in the front spat tobacco into the dirt. I got a mule that's more useful. More laughter. Mabel closed her eyes. She thought about her grandmother's stories, about women who walked into rivers and didn't come back, about mercy that came cold and quiet. Maybe that was her only way out. $10. Nothing. Samuel cursed under his breath. Worthless, can't even sell you. Then a voice cut through the noise like an axe through bone. I'll pay. The crowd went silent. Mabel's eyes snapped open. A man stepped forward, tall over 6 feet with shoulders that looked like they'd been built for carrying timber. His shirt was faded, his pants stained with sap and dirt, his boots scarred from years of hard use. His hair was dark with threads of early gray, and his face was weathered in a way that spoke of winters spent alone. But his eyes, they weren't cruel, they weren't hungry, they were just tired. You'll pay what? Pritchard asked. Whatever he's asking. The man didn't look at Mabel yet. He looked straight at Samuel. Name your price. Samuel's greed flared to life. $50. The crowd gasped. $50 was a month's wages. For a barren woman, done. The stranger pulled a worn leather pouch from his coat and counted out the money without hesitation. He handed it to Pritchard, then turned to Samuel. The locket, too. Samuel hesitated, then tossed it over. The stranger caught it like it was made of glass. He tucked it into his pocket. Then finally he looked at Mabel. Can you walk? She nodded. Her voice was gone. Then let's go. He turned and walked toward the tree line, not back toward town, toward the forest that stretched for miles beyond Millbrook. Mabel glanced back. Her father counted his money. Her mother stared at the ground. The crowd had already moved on to the next sale. No one stopped her. No one said goodbye. She gripped her satchel and followed the stranger into the trees. They walked for an hour. He didn't speak, didn't look back, just kept a steady pace along a narrow path that wound through pines and underbrush. Mabel's feet screamed. Her dress snagged on thorns. But she didn't complain. What would she even say? Finally, he stopped, turned, looked at her like he'd forgotten she was there. You all right? She nodded. You need water? She shook her head. You always this quiet. I don't know what you want me to say. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. He started walking again. 10 minutes later, the trees opened into a clearing. A cabin stood at the center, rough logs, a stone chimney, a porch patched with mismatched planks. Smoke rose from the chimney. Clothes hung on a line. A garden sprawled wild along one side. It looked lived in, barely. The man stopped at the porch steps. Name's Silas Jennings. I got 4 kids. Lost my wife 2 years back. His voice was flat, matter of fact. House needs work. Kids need someone who won't run off. Mabel's throat tightened. What do you want from me? Nothing you don't choose to give. I don't understand. You work if you want. You leave if you will want. But nobody here's going to judge you for what you can't do. He pulled the locket from his pocket and held it out. This is yours. Don't let anyone take it again. Her hand shook as she took it. The metal was warm. Why did you pay for me? Silas looked away. His jaw tightened. And because I know what it's like to be sold. His voice dropped. And I know what it's like when no one buys you. Before she could ask what that meant, the front door slammed open. 4 children exploded onto the porch. The oldest, a boy of maybe 12, stopped dead. His eyes locked on Mabel, his arms crossed, his face turned hard. Next came a younger boy, 9 or so, with tangled hair and dirt-streaked knees. He tilted his head like a confused dog. A girl, maybe 7, barefoot and drowning in an oversized dress, clung to the doorframe. Her eyes were huge. and in the shadows behind her, barely visible, a small boy peeked out, 4 years old, maybe less. "This is Josiah, Eli, Hannah, and Benji," Silas said. "Kids, this is Mabel. She's staying." Josiah's face went dark. "Why?" "Because I said so. We don't need her." "Josiah." The boy's mouth snapped shut, but his eyes stayed on Mabel, cold, measuring. Eli stepped forward. "Can you cook?" "Yes." "Good. Papa burns everything." A ghost of a smile touched Mabel's lips. It felt strange. Hannah moved closer. Her bare feet made no sound. "Are you nice?" Mabel crouched to her level. "I'll try to be." "Mama was nice." Hannah's voice was so small. "Mama used to sing." The air went heavy. Mabel's chest tightened to her head. "Can you sing?" Hannah shook her head. "Then maybe we can learn together." Hannah's eyes widened, just a little. Benji finally spoke. His voice was a whisper. "Are you staying forever?" Mabel looked up at Silas. He watched her with those tired, unreadable eyes. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm here now." Silas nodded once. "Good enough." He gestured toward the cabin. "There's a room off the kitchen. It's small, but it's yours. You knew you'd bring someone back. I knew someone would need help." He walked past her up the steps. "Turned out to be you." The children followed, all except Josiah. He stood on the top step, blocking her path. "Don't think you're replacing her. I'm not trying to." "You can't." His voice cracked. "Nobody can." "I know." "Then why are you here?" Mabel met his eyes. "Because I had nowhere else to go." For a moment something flickered in his face, something that looked almost like understanding. Then it was gone. He turned and disappeared inside. Mabel stood alone in the clearing, clutching her satchel and her locket, staring at the cabin that was somehow impossibly now hers. She didn't cry. She'd cried enough. Instead, she walked up those steps and through that door. The room was tiny, a cot, a crate for a table, a window that looked out at the trees. "Blankets are in the trunk," Silas said from the doorway. "Tomorrow starts early." "Silas." He stopped. "Thank you." He didn't turn around. "Don't thank me yet. You haven't met them in the morning." His footsteps faded. Mabel sat on the cot and opened her satchel. Everything she owned fit inside one change of clothes, a hairbrush, a Bible, letters from her dead grandmother. She pulled out the Bible and pressed it to her chest, the way she used to during thunderstorms as a child. From the next room, voices drifted through the thin walls. "She's too skinny," Eli said. "She's sad," Hannah whispered. "Bud, she's not staying," Josiah said flatly. "How do you know?" "Because nobody does." Mabel closed her eyes. She understood that anger. She'd lived in it for 3 months. The bitterness of abandonment, the fear of hoping for something good, only to watch it die. But as she lay down and pulled the rough blanket over herself, she made a promise. "I'll stay, at least long enough to prove I'm not like the others." She didn't know if she could keep it, but she wanted to try. Morning came with screaming. Mabel jolted awake. For a second, she didn't know where she was. Then the memories crashed back. The auction, Silas, the cabin. The screaming got louder. She stumbled into the kitchen. Silas stood at the stove, trying to crack eggs with one hand, while Benji clung to his legs, sobbing. "I want Mama! I want Mama!" Silas's face was stone, but his hands shook. "I know, son." Josiah out at the table, staring at nothing. Eli wrestled with Hannah's shoes. The girl kept kicking them off. Chaos. No one noticed Mabel. She moved quickly, quietly. She knelt beside Benji. "Hey," he hiccuped. His face was red and soaked. "Your papa's trying to make breakfast, but I think the eggs are winning. Want to help me?" Benji's lip trembled. "I don't know you." "That's okay. I don't know you either." She held out her hand. "But maybe we can fix that." He stared at her hand. Then slowly he took it. Mabel stood and looked at Silas. "I'll take the stove." "You handle them." Silas stared at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Then he nodded and stepped back. Mabel took the spatula. The eggs were a disaster, burnt on one side, raw on the other. She scraped them into a bowl and started over. Behind her, Silas coaxed Hannah into her dress. Eli argued about washing his face. Josiah stayed silent, but the crying stopped. 20 minutes later, they sat around the table, mismatched, exhausted, eating scrambled eggs and slightly burnt toast. It wasn't much, but the silence felt different, lighter. Silas looked at her across the table. "Thank you. It's just eggs." "No." His voice was quiet, firm. "It's not." Josiah pushed his plate away. "Mama made them better." The table went silent. Mabel met his eyes. "I'm sure she did." "Then why are you here?" "Because she's not." The words came out harder than she meant. "And you still need to eat." Josiah's face went red. He shoved back from the table and stormed out. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. Eli stared at his plate. Benji's hand found Mabel's under the table. He squeezed once, then let go. Silas rubbed his face. "He'll come around." "Maybe." Mabel stood and started clearing plates. "Or maybe he won't. Either way, I'm still here." Silas watched her move around the kitchen, watched her wash dishes with shaking hands, watched her wipe down the table like it mattered. "Why'd you really come with me?" he asked suddenly. She stopped, turned, met his eyes. "Because when you held that locket, you didn't hold it like it was worth $50. Her voice cracked. "You held it like it was worth saving." Silas's throat worked. He looked away. "I know what it's like to be called worthless," Mabel said quietly. "And I know what it's like when someone proves them wrong." She turned back to the dishes. Behind her, Silas stood, walked to the door, stopped. "My wife didn't die in childbirth," he said. His back was to her. She left. "Took off with a traveling preacher. Told me the kids deserved better than a man who couldn't give them anything but trees and dirt." Mabel's hands stilled in the water. "I bought you," Silas continued, "because I know what it feels like to be the thing someone throws away." He finally turned. His eyes were raw. "And I'll be damned if I let that happen to someone else when I can stop it." He walked out. The door closed. Mabel stood at the sink, her hands dripping, her heart pounding. For the first time since the auction, she understood. She hadn't been bought. She'd been rescued by someone who knew exactly what drowning felt like, and maybe, just maybe, she could return the favor. She dried her hands. Then she went to find Josiah. She found Josiah behind the woodshed, throwing stones at a tree with enough force to strip bark. He didn't turn when she approached, just kept throwing. Each stone hit with a sharp crack that echoed through the clearing. Mabel stopped a few feet back, didn't speak, just watched. After the 7th stone, he whirled around. "What do you want?" "Nothing." "Then why are you here?" "Because you're here." His face twisted. "I don't need you following me around like some stray dog." "Good thing I'm not following you. I'm just standing here." Another stone, harder this time. It split a chunk of bark clean off. "You think you can just walk in and fix everything?" His voice cracked. "You think making eggs and washing dishes makes you one of us?" "No." That stopped him. He turned, eyes blazing. "Then what do you think?" "I think you're angry, and I think you have every right to be." His jaw clenched. "You don't know anything about me." "You're right. I don't." Mabel took a step closer. "But I know what it's like when someone leaves, when they look at you and decide you're not worth staying for." Josiah's hands balled into fists. "She didn't leave because of us." "I know. She left because—" His voice broke. "Because Papa couldn't give her enough. That wasn't your fault." "Then why does it feel like it was—" The words exploded out of him. "Why does it feel like if we'd been better, she would have stayed?" Mabel's chest tightened. She recognized that guilt, had worn it like chains for months after Thomas left. The constant whisper that if she'd been different, been more, been enough, he wouldn't have walked away. "Because that's what abandonment does," she said quietly. "It makes you blame yourself for someone else's choice." Josiah stared at her. His eyes were red. Your mama leaving had nothing to do with how good you are, Mabel continued. Just like my not being able to have children had nothing to do with how much I was worth. But it took me a long time to believe that. Do you believe it now? She hesitated. I'm trying to. He picked up another stone, turned it over in his hand. Why'd you come with Papa? Because I didn't have anywhere else to go. That's it. That's it. He threw the stone. It sailed past the tree and disappeared into the brush. You're going to leave too. They all do. Maybe. Mabel's voice was steady, but not today. Josiah looked at her, really looked at her, like he was trying to figure out if she was lying. Then he walked past her toward the cabin, stopped halfway. Mama used to burn the eggs too, he said, without turning around. We never told her because it would have hurt her feelings. Then he was gone. Mabel stood alone behind the woodshed, holding on to those words like they were a lifeline. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close, but it was a start. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work and silence. Mabel woke before dawn, made breakfast, cleaned, mended clothes, swept floors, weeded the garden, made dinner, fell into bed exhausted. The children watched her like she was a puzzle they couldn't solve. Eli tested her constantly. Can you chop wood? No. Can you shoot? No. Can you fix a broken wagon wheel? No. But when he sliced his hand open on a rusty nail, she cleaned it, wrapped it tight, and told him stories until he stopped crying. After that, he stopped asking what she couldn't do. Hannah followed her everywhere, silent as a ghost, never speaking unless spoken to, but always there watching with those huge eyes. On the third night, Mabel found her standing in the doorway of her room. Can't sleep? Hannah shook her head. Want to come in? She nodded. Mabel pulled back the blanket. Hannah climbed in her small body, trembling. Mabel wrapped an arm around her and started humming. Not a real song, just a melody her grandmother used to hum when Mabel couldn't sleep. Hannah's breathing slowed, steadied. Within minutes, she was asleep. Mabel held her through the night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how someone so small could feel so heavy. Benji was the easiest. He didn't test, didn't watch, he just accepted. When Mabel was in the kitchen, he played at her feet. When she hung laundry, he handed her clothespins. When she sat down to rest, he climbed into her lap. On the fourth morning, he called her Mabel Mama and didn't even realize what he'd said. But Josiah heard. His face went dark. He grabbed Benji by the arm. She's not your mama. Benji's eyes filled with tears. But she's not. Josiah's voice was too loud, too sharp. Stop pretending she is. Silas looked up from his coffee. Josiah, what, you're just going to let him call her that? He can call her whatever he wants. That's not fair. She's not. Josiah's voice cracked again. She's not her. No one's asking her to be. Josiah shoved back from the table and stormed out. Again, Benji buried his face in Mabel's apron and cried. Silas rubbed his temples. He's not angry at you. I know, Mabel stroked Benji's hair. He's angry at her. Yeah. And at you. Silas's hand stilled on his cup. Yeah. Why? Because I didn't go after her. His voice was flat, empty. When she left, I didn't chase her down and drag her back. I just let her go. You had 4 kids to take care of. That's what I tell myself. He stood and carried his cup to the sink. Doesn't make it true. He walked out, leaving Mabel alone with 3 children and a silence that felt like drowning. A week passed, then 2. Mabel fell into a rhythm. Wake, work, sleep, repeat. The house slowly transformed. Floors got cleaner, meals got better, clothes got mended. The garden started producing actual vegetables instead of weeds with delusions. Silas watched it all with quiet eyes. He didn't say much, never did. But sometimes late at night, Mabel would catch him staring at her like he couldn't quite figure out what she was. On the 16th day, he broke the silence. They were sitting on the porch after dinner. The children were inside playing some game that involved a lot of running and screaming. Mabel was mending one of Eli's shirts. Silas was sharpening an axe. You settling in all right? She looked up. Yes. Kids giving you trouble. Nothing I can't handle. He nodded, went back to sharpening. The rhythmic scrape of stone on metal filled the air. You miss your Painley? He asked suddenly. Mabel's hands stilled. No, not even a little. They sold me. That doesn't mean you can't miss them. She set down the shirt, looked out at the tree line. I miss who I thought they were, before everything happened, before I became the broken thing they needed to get rid of. Silas stopped sharpening. You're not broken. I can't have children. That doesn't make you broken. That makes you someone who can't have children. There's a difference. Not to them. Then they're fools. He tested the edge of the axe with his thumb. My wife could have children. Had 4 of them. Still left. So I'm thinking maybe the ability to bear kids isn't the measure of a person's worth. Mabel looked at him, really looked at him, the lines around his eyes, the gray in his hair, the exhaustion that lived on his bones. Why did you really buy me? She asked. The truth. He was quiet for a long time, so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because when I was 14, my father sold me to a logging camp to pay off a debt. Worked there for 6 years. They called me property, treated me like I was less than the mules. And when I finally earned enough to buy my freedom, I swore I'd never let anyone else feel that way if I could stop it. Mabel's breath caught. Silas. So when I saw you standing on that platform looking like you wanted to disappear into the dirt, I saw myself. He met her eyes, and I couldn't walk away. The weight of his words settled between them like a living thing. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me, you're the one doing all the work. I mean for seeing me when everyone else just saw something broken. His throat worked, he nodded once, then stood and went inside. Mabel sat alone on the porch, holding a half-mended shirt, feeling something shift inside her chest. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like merchandise. She felt like a person. Dumbed. The following Saturday, Silas announced they were going to town. Need supplies, he said at breakfast. Flour, salt, nails, usual things. Josiah looked up sharply. Is she coming? Her name's Mabel, and yes. Why? Because she needs fabric for winter clothes, and because I said so. Josiah's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. Mabel's stomach twisted. She hadn't been back to Millbrook since the auction, hadn't wanted to face the stares, the whispers, the laughter. I can stay here, she said, with the children. No. Silas's voice was firm. You need to be seen with us. People need to understand you're part of this family now. I'm not. You cook our food, mend our clothes, sleep under our roof. Far as I'm concerned, that makes you family. He stood and grabbed his hat. Get ready. We leave in 20 minutes. Mabel's hands shook as she changed into her better dress, the same one she'd worn to the auction. She tied her hair back, pinned her grandmother's locket around her neck. When she came out, Hannah was waiting. You look pretty. Thank you, sweetheart. Are you scared? Mabel crouched down. A little. Papa says being scared is okay. It means you're being brave. Your papa's a smart man. Hannah took her hand. I'll stay with you, so you're not alone. Something in Mabel's chest cracked open. She squeezed the small hand. Thank you. The ride to town was tense. Josiah sat as far from Mabel as possible. Eli bounced between them, asking 1,000 questions. Benji fell asleep in Mabel's lap. Hannah held her hand the entire way. Silas drove in silence, his face set like stone. When they reached Millbrook, Mabel's stomach dropped. The market square looked exactly the same. Same stalls, same crowd, same auctioneer's platform standing empty in the center. People stared. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Eyes followed them down the main street like searchlights hunting prey. Mabel kept her chin up, kept breathing, kept walking. They stopped at the general store. Silas handed Mabel a list. Get what you need. I'll handle the heavy stuff. She took the list with shaking hands and went inside. The store was crowded, women shopping for their families, men buying tools, children begging for penny candy. Everyone went silent when she entered. Mrs. Fletcher stood near the fabric section. Her eyes widened. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Mabel. Mrs. Fletcher. I didn't know you were... I heard that someone bought you, but I didn't realize. I'm staying with Silas Jennings, helping with his children. Oh. Mrs. Fletcher's face softened. How is it? Is he treating you well? Better than I deserve. Don't say that. Mrs. Fletcher stepped closer, her voice dropping. What your father did was wrong. Everyone knows it. He's been blacklisted from half the businesses in town. Mabel blinked. What? After the auction, people started refusing to serve him. Said any man who'd sell his own daughter wasn't worth doing business with. She reached out and squeezed Mabel's hand. You didn't deserve what happened to you. Tears burned Mabel's eyes. Thank you. Mrs. Fletcher smiled. Now what fabric do you need? I just got in some lovely wool that would make beautiful winter coats for those children. They spent the next 30 minutes picking out fabric thread buttons. Mrs. Fletcher talked the entire time, filling Mabel in on town gossip like nothing had changed. It felt normal, almost. Then the door opened. Mabel's blood turned to ice. Thomas Walker stepped inside, and on his arm was his new wife, Penelope, the woman who'd replaced her. Thomas froze. His face went pale. Mabel. She straightened her spine. Thomas. Penelope's eyes narrowed. She was beautiful blonde hair, perfect figure, expensive dress. Everything Mabel wasn't. Well, Penelope said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Look who crawled out of the dirt. I heard your father sold you like livestock. How humiliating that must have been. The store went silent again. Everyone was watching. Mabel's hands clenched, but she kept her voice steady. Not as humiliating as being bought by a good man instead of begging one to stay. Penelope's smile faltered. Thomas cleared his throat. Mabel, I'm sorry about... Don't. She held up a hand. You made your choice. I've made mine. We're done. But I want you to know, I don't care what you want me to know. Her voice was calm, cold. You left because you thought I was broken, and maybe I am, but I'd rather be broken and wanted than whole and settled for. She turned back to Mrs. Fletcher. I'll take the blue wool and the brown for the boys. Mrs. Fletcher beamed. Excellent choice. Thomas and Penelope stood frozen for a moment. Then Penelope grabbed his arm and dragged him toward the door, but not before Mabel heard her hiss, She's delusional, as if anyone actually wants her. The door slammed shut. Mabel's hands shook as she paid for the fabric, but she kept her head up, kept breathing. Mrs. Fletcher leaned close. You handled that beautifully. I don't feel beautiful. That's because beauty isn't something you feel dear. It's something you are, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. Outside, Silas was loading supplies into the wagon. Josiah helped him, his movements sharp and angry. Mabel carried her parcels over and set them in the back. Get what you needed? Silas asked. Yes. He studied her face. You all right? I ran into Thomas. His jaw tightened. He say something. His wife did, but I handled it. Good. He lifted the last sack of flour into the wagon. Because if she'd said one more word, I was going to have some things to say myself. Mabel looked at him. You were listening. Whole town was listening. Store walls aren't that thick. He wiped his hands on his pants. For what it's worth, you were right. You're better off broken and wanted than whole and settled for. Her throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for having the spine to say it. They climbed into the wagon. Silas clicked the reins. The horses started forward. They'd made it halfway down the main street when someone called out. Jennings. Silas pulled the horses to a stop, turned. A man Mabel didn't recognize stood on the boardwalk. He was well-dressed, clean-shaven, with the kind of smug expression that came from never knowing hardship. "Heard you bought Samuel Barnes's daughter," the man said. "Curious choice. Everyone knows she's barren. What exactly are you planning to do with her?" The air went cold. Silas's hands tightened on the reins. His face didn't change, but something in his eyes turned to ice. He handed the reins to Josiah, then climbed down from the wagon. Mabel's heart pounded. "Silas, don't." He walked straight up to the man, stood toe-to-toe with him, and, "What I do with Mabel is none of your business," he said quietly. "But since you asked, I'll tell you. She cooks meals that don't poison my children. She mends clothes so they're not walking around in rags. She stays up through the night when one of them is sick. And she does it without complaining, without asking for thanks, and without judging my children for things they can't control." His voice dropped, "Which is more than I can say for most people in this town." The man's face flushed. You were just making it clear that you measure a woman's worth by what's between her legs instead of what's in her heart." Silas stepped closer. "That tells me everything I need to know about you." He turned and walked back to the wagon, climbed up, took the reins from Josiah. "Let's go." The wagon rolled forward. The man stood on the boardwalk, his face red with rage and humiliation. No one said a word the entire ride home, but when they pulled into the clearing, Josiah turned to Mabel. "That was the best thing I've ever seen," he said. His voice was quiet, almost shy. Mabel looked at him. "What was—" "Someone standing up for you. Someone meaning it." He jumped down from the wagon and walked toward the cabin, but Mabel saw it. The tiniest crack in his armor, and she knew slowly, painfully, one day at a time, they were all starting to heal. That night, after the children were asleep, Mabel found Silas on the porch. He sat in the dark, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, staring at nothing. She sat down beside him, didn't speak. After a long silence, he did. "I shouldn't have lost my temper in town." "You didn't lose your temper. You defended me." "Same thing." "No, it's not." She turned to face him. "Losing your temper is throwing a punch. What you did was tell the truth." He looked at her. His eyes were shadows in the dark. "I meant what I said, about measuring worth." "I know. Do you believe it?" She hesitated. "I'm starting to." He nodded, sipped his coffee. "Good, because it's true." They sat in silence. The night air was cool. Crickets sang in the grass. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. "Silas." "Yeah, why didn't you remarry after your wife left?" His hands tightened on the cup. "Because I didn't want to bring someone into this mess who'd just leave again. Didn't seem fair. To them or to you, both." Mabel looked out at the trees. "I think people leave because they're looking for something they think they're missing, and sometimes they find it, but most of the time they just find more of what they already had, just in a different place." "You think she regrets it?" "I don't know, but I think if she saw what you've built here, these kids, this life, this home, she'd realize she walked away from something irreplaceable." Silas was quiet. Then, "You think this place is a home?" "I think it could be." "For you." She met his eyes. "Maybe." Something passed between them, something unspoken, something fragile and new. Then Silas stood. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's another long day." "Silas." He stopped. "Thank you for what you said in town." He looked back at her. "Don't thank me for telling the truth." Then he disappeared inside. Mabel found alone on the porch, her heart beating too fast, her mind spinning. For the first time since the auction, she wasn't thinking about what she'd lost. She was thinking about what she might be starting to find. And it terrified her, because finding something meant she could lose it again, but staying meant she had to risk it. So she made a choice. She stood, walked inside, locked the door, and decided to stay one more day, then another, until staying stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like home. 3 weeks later, everything changed in the space of a heartbeat. Mabel was in the garden pulling carrots when she heard the scream, high-pitched, terrified. Hannah, she dropped the basket and ran. Hannah stood frozen near the woodshed, her face white as death. At her feet, coiled and rattling, was a snake. Mabel didn't think. She grabbed the shovel leaning against the shed and brought it down hard, once, twice. The snake's head separated from its body. Hannah collapsed. Mabel caught her before she hit the ground. "You're okay. You're okay. I've got you." The girl was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Mabel carried her to the porch and held her tight, rocking back and forth, whispering nonsense words until the shaking stopped. Silas came running from the tree line, axe in hand. "What happened?" "Snake! It's dead." He looked at Hannah, then at Mabel, then at the dead snake by the woodshed. His face went pale. "Rattler?" "Yes." "Did it bite her?" "No." She froze, didn't move. He set down the axe and knelt in front of Hannah. "You're all right, baby girl. You're safe." Hannah threw her arms around his neck and sobbed. Over her head, Silas's eyes met Mabel's. Something raw and grateful lived in them. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't. Anyone would have." "No, they wouldn't." His voice was firm. "Thank you." That night, Hannah refused to sleep in her own room. She clung to Mabel like a barnacle, her small fingers twisted in Mabel's nightgown. "Can I stay with you?" "Of course." They lay in the narrow cot together. Hannah's breathing was still uneven, hitching every few seconds, like she might start crying again. "Mabel, yes. Are you going to leave?" The question hit like a punch. "Why would you ask that?" "Because everyone does. Mama left. And the lady before you left after 2 days. Papa said she couldn't handle it." Mabel's chest tightened. "There was someone before me." 3 someones. They all left. 3. Silas had tried this 3 times before her. 3 times he'd brought someone home to help. 3 times they'd walked away. "I'm not leaving," Mabel said. "How do you know?" "Because I have nowhere else to go and because I don't want to." Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Mama said she loved us. Then she left anyway. So saying it doesn't make it true." The pain in those words was so old, so deep, it made Mabel's throat close. "You're right," she said carefully. "Words are easy. It's the staying that's hard." "So how do I know you'll stay?" "You don't, not yet." Mabel stroked her hair. "But every morning I'm still here, you'll know a little bit more." Hannah's breathing finally steadied. Within minutes, she was asleep. But Mabel stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the 3 women who'd tried and failed to make this place home. What had broken them, and what would break her? The next morning, Josiah was different. He didn't glare when she served breakfast, didn't leave the table when she sat down, and when she passed him the bread, he said, "Thank you." It was the first time he'd spoken directly to her in days. After breakfast, he lingered while the others scattered to their morning tasks. "You killed that snake pretty fast yesterday." Mabel looked up from washing dishes. "I didn't think, just reacted. Most people freeze. I've been frozen before, it doesn't help." He picked at a splinter in the table. "The last woman who was here, she screamed when she saw a spider, ran out of the house and didn't come back." "I'm not afraid of spiders." "What are you afraid of?" The question caught her off guard. She set down the plate she was washing and looked at him. "Being useless," she said honestly. "Being the thing people throw away." Josiah's jaw tightened. "That's why Mama left. She said Papa made her feel useless, said she was dying here. That wasn't your fault." "Feels like it was." "Feelings lie sometimes." He looked at her sharply. "You really believe that?" "I have to, otherwise I'd still believe I'm worthless because I can't have children." His eyes searched her face, looking for cracks, for lies, for proof she was like all the others. Then he nodded once and walked out, but the wall between them had thinned, just a little. That afternoon, Eli cut his leg with an axe. He'd been trying to split kindling, and the blade glanced off a knot and bit into his shin, deep. His scream brought everyone running. Silas got there first. He took one look at the blood and his face went hard. Get him inside. They carried Eli to the kitchen table. Mabel grabbed clean rags and the bottle of whiskey Silas kept for emergencies. The cut was bad, bone deep. Blood poured out faster than she could soak it up. We need a doctor, Silas said, his voice tight. Town's an hour away. He'll bleed out before we get there. Mabel pressed a rag hard against the wound. Eli screamed, "Hold him down." Silas grabbed his son's shoulders. Josiah took his arms. Hannah stood frozen in the doorway, her face white. Mabel poured whiskey over the wound. Eli's scream nearly took the roof off. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, I'm so sorry." She threaded a needle with shaking hands. "This is going to hurt. I don't want to die." "You're not going to die. I won't let you." She started stitching. Her hands shook, but her stitches held. Eli thrashed and sobbed. Silas held him down, his face twisted with pain. "Talk to him," Mabel said. "Keep him focused on something besides the pain." Silas swallowed hard. "You remember the time we went fishing? You caught that trout bigger than your head." Eli's screams turned to whimpers. "We cooked it for dinner and you wouldn't share with anyone. Said you caught it so you got to eat it." A ghost of a smile touched Eli's lips. "Your mama laughed so hard she cried. Said you were the stubbornest kid she'd ever seen." The whimpering quieted. Mabel tied off the last stitch and wrapped the leg tight. "Done." Eli's head lolled back. His face was gray with pain and shock. "He needs rest," Mabel said, "and water, lots of water." Silas lifted him carefully and carried him to his bed. Mabel followed with bandages and a basin. They worked in silence, changing his sweat-soaked clothes, covering him with blankets, setting a cup of water on the table beside his bed. When they finally stepped into the hall, Silas leaned against the wall and put his head in his hands. "I thought I was going to lose him." "You didn't. Because of you. Anyone could have." "Stop saying that." He looked up, his eyes red. "Anyone couldn't have. The last woman who was here fainted at the sight of blood. The one before her refused to touch anything that might be dirty. You just saved my son's life. Stop pretending that's ordinary." Mabel's hands were still shaking. She pressed them against her skirt. "I was terrified." "Good. That means you cared enough to be scared." He pushed off the wall and walked back into Eli's room, sat in the chair beside the bed. Mabel stood in the doorway and watched him hold his son's hand. After a moment she turned and went to check on the others. Hannah was on the porch, crying silently. Mabel sat beside her and pulled her close. "Is Eli going to die?" "No." "How do you know?" "Because the wound was clean, and because he's strong, and because he has a family that loves him." "Will he be able to walk?" "Eventually, but he'll need help for a while." Hannah wiped her eyes. "Can I help?" "Of course. What can I do?" "You can sit with him, read to him, keep him company so he doesn't get lonely." Hannah nodded. Then she threw her arms around Mabel's neck. "Thank you for not letting him die." Mabel held her tight and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like a lie. She'd been terrified. Her hands had shaken so badly she'd almost dropped the needle twice, and the whole time she'd stitched, a voice in her head kept screaming that she was going to fail, that Eli would die, that it would be her fault. But she'd done it anyway, and he was alive. That night, after everyone was asleep, Mabel sat on the porch and cried. She cried for Eli, for Hannah, for the terror that still lived in her chest, for the weight of being needed so desperately that someone's life depended on her not failing. She cried until her ribs ached and her eyes swelled shut. Then Silas stepped out onto the porch. He didn't say anything, just sat down beside her and handed her a handkerchief. She took it, wiped her face, tried to breathe. "I was so scared," she whispered. "I know. What if I'd failed? You didn't. But what if I had?" He turned to look at her. His face was shadowed in the dark, but his voice was clear. "Then we would have buried him and grieved him and lived with it for the rest of our lives. But you didn't fail. You saved him, and that's what matters. I didn't know what I was doing. Nobody does. We just do the best we can and hope it's enough. He was quiet for a moment. My wife, she couldn't handle that, the not knowing, the constant fear that something would go wrong and she wouldn't be able to fix it. It ate her alive until she couldn't stand it anymore. Is that why she left? Part of it. The other part was she wanted more than this. More than trees and dirt and kids who needed her every second of every day. She wanted to be something besides a mother. There's nothing wrong with that. No, but there's something wrong with leaving your kids to chase it. His voice went hard. She could have asked me to move, to find work in a city, to give her room to breathe, but she didn't. She just left a note and disappeared with a man who promised her the world. Mabel's chest ached. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm not. He looked at her. Because if she'd stayed, I wouldn't have gone to that auction, and you'd be dead or worse. The words hung between them like a living thing. You really think that? I know that. You were ready to give up. I saw it in your eyes. Another week, and you would have walked into that river and not come back. He was right. She had thought about it every day for 2 weeks before the auction. The cold water, the silence, the peace of finally being done. Why does that matter to you? She asked. Because I've stood at that river too, and the only reason I didn't walk in was because I had 4 kids who needed me to stay. He met her eyes. So yeah, it matters, because I know what it costs to choose to keep living, and I'm glad you did. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only sit there with tears streaming down her face while he handed her his handkerchief again. Get some sleep, he said finally. Eli's going to need you tomorrow. He stood and went inside. Mabel sat alone in the dark, holding a stranger's handkerchief, wondering how someone who barely knew her could see straight through to the truth she'd never spoken aloud, and wondering what it meant that he cared. The next week passed in a fog of exhaustion. Eli's wound got infected. Fever spiked. He thrashed and screamed and begged for his mother. Mabel stayed by his side, changed bandages, forced water down his throat, bathed his face with cool cloths, slept in the chair beside his bed because every time she tried to leave, he panicked. Silas worked from sunup to sundown to make up for the loss of Eli's help. Josiah tried to fill in, but he was too young, too small. He'd come home each night exhausted and angry, slamming doors and snapping at everyone. Hannah stopped talking altogether. She just followed Mabel around like a ghost, holding her skirt, her eyes huge and haunted. Benji cried constantly. He didn't understand why Eli was sick or why everyone was so scared. He just knew something was wrong, and it terrified him. On the 5th night, Eli's fever broke. He opened his eyes and looked at Mabel. Am I dead? No, sweetheart, you're alive. It hurts. I know, but you're going to be okay. He closed his eyes. Don't leave. I won't. Promise. She hesitated. Promises were dangerous. They could break, could turn into lies. But looking at his pale face, his too thin frame, his hands that still reached for her, even in sleep, she couldn't say no. I promise. He smiled, then slept. Mabel sat in the chair and cried again, not from fear this time, from relief, from exhaustion, from the weight of a promise she didn't know if she could keep. When Silas came to check on Eli, he found her like that, crying silently in the dark. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just pulled another chair up beside hers and sat. They stayed like that until dawn. 2 people who'd been broken by the world sitting in the dark, watching a child breathe. And somehow it was enough. 2 days later, Eli was strong enough to sit up. 3 days after that, he was demanding food every hour. By the end of the week, he was limping around the house, complaining about being bored. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it ever got. But something had shifted. Mabel felt it in the way Josiah looked at her now, not with suspicion, with something closer to trust. She felt it in the way Hannah held her hand, not out of fear, out of choice. She felt it in the way Benji called her mama without hesitation, and in the way no one corrected him anymore. and she felt it in the way Silas watched her, like she was a puzzle he was starting to solve. One evening after the children were in bed, he asked her to walk with him. They followed a narrow path through the trees. The air was cool. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt. "I need to tell you something," he said. Her stomach dropped. "Okay. You've been here almost 2 months, and in that time you've saved Hannah from a snake, saved Eli from bleeding out, and kept this family from falling apart." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I can't pay you. I don't have money for wages, but I need you to know that you're not a servant here. You're family, and if you ever want to leave, I won't stop you, but I'm hoping you won't." Mabel stared at him. "Why?" "Because we need you." "No, why are you hoping I'll stay?" His jaw tightened. "Because losing you would hurt, and I've had enough hurt for one lifetime." The honesty in his voice broke something open inside her. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what? Of staying, of mattering, of letting myself believe this is real, and then losing it." "Join the club." She looked up at him. "You're scared too. Terrified every damn day." He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle it made her chest ache. "But I'd rather be scared with you here than relieved with you gone." "That doesn't make sense." "Love rarely does." The word hung between them like a lit match, near gunpowder. "Did you just say love?" He looked away. "Forget I said that." "No." She stepped closer. "Say it again. Mabel, say it." He met her eyes. "I'm falling in love with you, and it scares the hell out of me, because the last woman I loved left me with 4 kids and a broken heart, and I don't know if I can survive that again." Her hands shook. "I'm not her. I know. I won't leave. You don't know that. No one does." "You're right." She took his hand. "But I can promise that if I ever want to go, I'll tell you first. I won't just disappear." His fingers tightened around hers. "That's all I'm asking." They stood in the dark, holding hands, 2 broken people trying to figure out how to be whole again. Then Silas pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "Let's go home." She nodded, and together they walked back through the trees toward the cabin where 4 children slept and a life she'd never imagined was starting to take root. The next morning, everything felt different. Silas smiled at her over breakfast. Josiah passed her the butter without being asked. Hannah climbed into her lap and fell asleep. Benji held her hand while she washed dishes. And for the first time since the auction, Mabel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. But safety was fragile, and the world had a way of shattering it when you least expected. That afternoon, a rider came. He dismounted in the yard and knocked on the door. Silas answered, his face immediately wary. "Help you. Looking for a woman named Mabel Barnes. Heard she might be here." Mabel's blood turned to ice. She stepped into the doorway. "I'm Mabel." The rider looked her up and down. "Your father sent me. Says you need to come home. Your mother's dying." The world tilted. "What?" "She's got the fever. Doctor says she won't last the week. Your father wants you there when she goes." Mabel couldn't breathe. Her mother, dying. The woman who'd stood silent while her husband sold her daughter like livestock. "Tell him no," she said. The rider blinked. "Ma'am." "Tell him I'm not coming." "But she's your mother. She stopped being my mother the day she let him auction me off." Her voice shook but held firm. "If she wants to see me before she dies, she can come here." The rider looked at Silas. "You going to let her talk like that?" "She's a grown woman. She can talk however she wants." Silas stepped beside Mabel. "You heard her. She's not going." The rider shook his head. "Your father's not going to like this. My father can go to hell." The man mounted his horse and rode off. Mabel stood in the doorway, shaking from head to foot. Silas put a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "No." "Want to talk about it?" "No." "Want me to leave you alone?" She turned and buried her face in his chest. "No." He wrapped his arms around her and held on while she fell apart. She cried for an hour, not gentle tears, not quiet grief, She sobbed like something inside her had finally cracked open and all the poison was pouring out. Years of abandonment, months of shame, weeks of terror that this new life would evaporate like steam. Silas held her through all of it, didn't speak, didn't try to fix it, just stood there in the doorway while she soaked his shirt with tears and rage. When she finally pulled away, her face was swollen and her voice was raw. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I got your shirt wet. I've got others." She tried to smile, failed. What kind of daughter refuses to see her dying mother? The kind whose mother let her be sold like cattle. His voice was gentle but firm. "You don't owe her anything, Mabel. Not forgiveness, not your presence, not even your grief." "But what if I regret it?" "Then you'll regret it. But that's better than going back to a place that almost killed you just to make someone else feel better about dying." She looked up at him. His face was so open, so certain. "How are you so sure?" "Because I spent 2 years wondering if I should have chased after my wife, if I should have dragged her back, if I should have begged her to stay." He touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "And you know what I learned? Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is let people go, even if they're dying." The words settled into her chest like stones, heavy, true. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to do that. You killed a rattlesnake with a shovel. You stitched up a boy's leg while he screamed. You stood in that market square and told your ex-fiancé you'd rather be broken and wanted than whole and settled for." He tilted her chin up. "You're stronger than you think." She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel as brave as he made her sound. But all she felt was tired. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. Hannah's soft breathing in the next room, Eli's occasional cough, the creak of Silas's footsteps as he checked on the children one last time before bed. Normal sounds, safe sounds. But her mind wouldn't quiet. Her mother was dying. The woman who'd given birth to her, who'd taught her to sew and cook and read. The woman who'd also stood silent while her husband destroyed their daughter's life. Which version was real? The mother who'd sung lullabies or the mother who'd watched her be auctioned off without saying a word? Both. Neither. It didn't matter anymore. She heard footsteps in the hall, then a soft knock. "Mabel, you awake?" Josiah's voice. "Yes, come in." He opened the door and stood in the doorway, backlit by the dim glow of the hall lamp. He looked younger in the half-light, more vulnerable. "Can't sleep?" "No." "Me neither." He shifted his weight. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why didn't you go to see your mother?" Mabel sat up, wrapped the blanket around her shoulders. "Because seeing her won't change anything. She'll still be dying, and I'll still be the daughter she didn't fight for." "But don't you want to say goodbye? To who? The woman who loved me or the woman who let me go?" Josiah was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped into the room and sat on the edge of her cot. "When Mama left, I didn't get to say goodbye either. She just wrote a note and disappeared." His voice cracked. "And for the longest time I thought if I'd just been better, if I'd helped more or complained less or been less of a burden, maybe she would have stayed." "Josiah, but then you came, and you stayed even though we were awful to you. Even though this place is hard and the work never ends and we're all a mess." He looked at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I realized it wasn't about me. It was about her. She left because she wanted to leave, not because we weren't enough." Mabel's throat tightened. "You were always enough." "So were you." He stood. "Your mama letting you get sold wasn't about you being broken. It was about her being too weak to fight for you. And that's not your fault." He left before she could respond. Mabel sat in the dark, holding those words like a lifeline. Maybe Josiah was right. Maybe her mother's weakness wasn't her burden to carry. Maybe she could let it go. The next morning, another rider came. This time, it was her father. Mabel saw him from the kitchen window, saw him dismount in the yard, saw Silas step out onto the porch to meet him. Her hands started shaking. She set down the bread dough she'd been kneading and wiped her hands on her apron. Hannah looked up from the table where she was drawing. Who's that man? No one good. Mabel walked to the door, stepped out onto the porch, stood beside Silas. Her father looked older, thinner. His face was gray with exhaustion and something that might have been regret. Mabel, "Father, your mother's asking for you." "I heard. She wants to see you before she dies." "I'm sure she does." His jaw tightened. "Don't be cruel." "Cruel?" The word came out sharp as broken glass. "You sold me. You stood on that platform and called me worthless and defective and auctioned me off like livestock. And you think I'm being cruel? I did what I had to do." "No, you did what was easiest. You got rid of the problem instead of dealing with it. You couldn't give us grandchildren. You couldn't fulfill your purpose. What was I supposed to do?" "Love me anyway." Her voice broke. "You were supposed to love me anyway." Samuel Barnes looked away, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "Your mother is dying. You can hate me all you want, but don't punish her for my choices." She made her choice, too. She stood there and watched. She didn't say a word. She was scared. So was I. Mabel stepped forward. "I was terrified. I begged you with my eyes to stop, and neither of you cared. So no, I'm not coming. If she wants to see me, she can come here." "She can't travel. She's too weak." "Then I guess she'll die without seeing me, just like I almost died without either of you caring." Her father's face crumpled. For a moment he looked like he might cry. "I'm sorry." The words were so quiet she almost didn't hear them. "What? I'm sorry." He looked at her, his eyes red. "I was wrong. I was scared and angry, and I took it out on you, and I've regretted it every day since." Mabel's chest felt like it was being crushed. "You don't get to apologize now. You don't get to wait until she's dying to suddenly care." "I know, but I'm saying it anyway." He took a step closer. Silas tensed beside her but didn't move. "I failed you, as a father, as a man, as a human being, and I can't undo that. But I'm begging you, not for me, for her, please come say goodbye." "Why should I?" "Because you're better than I am, and because you'll regret it if you don't." Mabel looked at Silas. He met her eyes. "Your choice," he said quietly. "I'll support whatever you decide." She turned back to her father, studied his face, the lines, the gray, the weight of guilt he carried like chains. "If I come, I'm not coming alone. Silas comes with me, and if you or anyone else says one word, one single word about me being barren or worthless or anything else, I'm walking out and you'll never see me again." "Agreed. And when it's over, I'm coming back here. This is my home now. These are my people. You don't get to take that away from me." "I understand." She looked at Silas again. "Will you come?" "Of course. Thank you." She turned to go inside, then stopped. "One more thing. I want you to sign a paper, legal documentation that I'm no longer your property, that you have no claim to me, that I'm free." Her father's face went pale. "Mabel, those are my terms. Sign the paper or I don't come." He was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. "I'll have it drawn up." "Good, we'll leave tomorrow morning." She went inside and closed the door. Her hands were still shaking, her heart was pounding, but she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Power. For the first time in her life, she'd dictated terms to her father. She'd set boundaries. She'd claimed her own worth. And he'd agreed. Silas came in a moment later. "You okay?" "No, but I will be." "You sure you want to do this?" "No, but I think I need to." He pulled her into his arms. "I'll be right there with you, every second." "I know. And the moment you want to leave, we leave, no questions asked." "Thank you." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other, gathering strength for whatever came next. That evening, Mabel told the children where she was going. Eli's face went pale. "You're leaving?" "Just for a day, maybe 2, then I'm coming back." "Promise?" "I promise." "What if you don't come back?" Hannah's voice was so small. "What if something happens?" Mabel knelt in front of her. "Nothing's going to happen. I'm just going to see my mother, say goodbye, then I'm coming home." "This is your home?" Benji asked. "For real? For real. Even if your mama asks you to stay. Even then. She pulled all three of them into a hug. You're my family now. This is where I belong. Josiah stood apart, his arms crossed. What if your father won't let you leave? He doesn't get to decide that anymore. But what if he tries? Silas stepped forward. Then I'll make sure he understands that Mabel goes where she wants. And if she wants to come back here, nothing's stopping her. Josiah looked between them, then nodded slowly. Okay, but if you're not back in 3 days, I'm coming after you. Mabel smiled. Deal. They left at dawn the next morning. The ride to town was tense. Samuel Barnes led the way on his horse. Silas and Mabel followed in the wagon. Neither of them spoke much. There wasn't much to say. When they reached Millbrook, people stared, whispered, pointed. But no one said anything, not with Silas beside her. Her parents' house looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged. The garden was overgrown with weeds. Samuel dismounted and tied his horse. She's in the bedroom. Mabel climbed down from the wagon. Silas was beside her instantly, his hand at her back. You ready? No. Want me to come in with you? Please. They walked inside together. The house smelled like sickness, like sweat and medicine and death. Mabel's stomach turned. Her father led them down the hall to the bedroom, knocked softly. Margaret Mabel's here, a weak voice answered. Send her in. Samuel opened the door, stepped aside. Mabel took a deep breath, squeezed Silas's hand, then walked into the room where her mother lay, dying. Margaret Barnes was a ghost of the woman Mabel remembered. Her face was gaunt, her skin was gray, her hair was thin and brittle. She lay in the bed covered to her chin with quilts, her breathing shallow and labored. But her eyes were the same, still blue, still sharp. Mabel, Mother, you came. I almost didn't. A sad smile touched Margaret's lips. I don't blame you. Mabel stood at the foot of the bed, her hands clenched. Why did you want to see me? To apologize, and to tell you the truth. What truth? Margaret's eyes drifted to Silas, then back to Mabel. Can we speak alone? Mabel looked at Silas. He nodded and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The room felt smaller, heavier. Sit down, Margaret said. I'd rather stand. Please. Mabel sat, but she kept her distance. Margaret struggled to sit up higher. Mabel didn't help, just watched. I wanted to tell you, Margaret began, her voice hoarse, that what your father did was unforgivable, and that I should have stopped him, but you didn't. No, I didn't. Why? Because I was weak and scared, and broken in ways I didn't know how to fix. Tears slipped down Margaret's face. I had 5 children before you. Did you know that? Mabel blinked. What, 5 babies, all born dead, or died within days? Margaret's voice cracked. By the time you were born and lived past your first year, I thought God had finally forgiven me. I thought you were my miracle. Mabel's hands shook. Mother, and then when you couldn't have children of your own, your father said it was my fault. Said I'd cursed you, said the barrenness ran in my blood. She sobbed. And I believed him. I thought I'd ruined you, so when he said we had to get rid of you, I didn't fight. I thought maybe you'd be better off away from me. The room was spinning. Mabel's chest was too tight. You let him sell me because you thought you'd cursed me. I know how that sounds. I know how weak and pathetic it is. But I was drowning, Mabel, and I couldn't save you because I couldn't even save myself. That's not an excuse. I know. That's why I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking you to understand. Margaret reached out a trembling hand. I loved you. I still love you, and I'm so sorry I wasn't strong enough to show it when you needed me to. Mabel stared at that outstretched hand. Part of her wanted to take it, to comfort this dying woman who'd given birth to her, to find some way to make peace. But the other part, the part that had been sold, humiliated, broken, couldn't do it. I can't forgive you, Mabel said. Not right now, maybe not ever. I know. But I can tell you this, I'm not cursed, I'm not broken, I'm just someone who can't have children, and that doesn't make me worthless. I know that now. You should have known it then. You're right. Margaret's hand dropped. You're absolutely right. They sat in silence. The only sound was Margaret's labored breathing and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Mabel stood. I'm glad I came, because now I know the truth, and I can stop wondering if I did something to deserve what happened. You didn't. You never did. I know. Mabel walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the knob. Goodbye, Mother. Mabel, she turned. That man outside, the one who brought you, does he treat you well? Better than I ever thought possible. Good. Margaret's eyes closed. That's good. Mabel left, closed the door, leaned against the wall, and tried to breathe. Silas was there instantly. You okay? No, but I will be. You want to leave? Not yet. I need to see my father first. They found Samuel in the kitchen, standing at the window, staring at nothing. She tell you? He asked without turning around. About the other children? Yes. I was cruel to her, blamed her for things she couldn't control, took my anger out on both of you. He finally turned. His face was ravaged with guilt. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know that I was wrong. About everything. You were. Mabel pulled a folded paper from her pocket. Sign this. He took it, read it. His face went pale. This says you're legally emancipated, that I have no rights to you. That's correct. Mabel, you don't need this. You're already... I need it. Her voice was hard, because without it you'll always have the legal right to make decisions for me, to come after me, to try to control me, and I won't live like that anymore. Samuel's hands shook as he picked up a pen. He signed the paper, handed it back. You're free. I know. She folded it carefully and tucked it back in her pocket. Now we're leaving. Wait. Samuel reached into a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box. This was your grandmother's. Your mother wanted you to have it. Mabel took the box, opened it. Inside was a silver ring with a small blue stone. She wore this every day of her life, Samuel's uncle said. Said it reminded her that even small things have value. Mabel's eyes burned. She closed the box. Thank you. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. For surviving. For finding a life. For being stronger than either of us ever were. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw what she'd never seen before. He wasn't a monster. He was just a broken man who'd made terrible choices. Goodbye, Father. Goodbye, Mabel. She walked out. Silas followed. They climbed into the wagon and drove away without looking back. They were halfway home when Mabel finally spoke. She had 5 dead children before me. I heard. She thought she'd cursed me, thought it was her fault I couldn't have babies. It wasn't. I know. Mabel looked down at the wooden box in her lap. But she didn't, and that destroyed her. That doesn't excuse what she did. No, but it explains it. She opened the box again, took out the ring, slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. My grandmother used to tell me that the measure of a person isn't what they survive. It's what they do with the surviving. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. Mabel leaned against his shoulder. I'm glad I went. Not because I forgave them, but because I got to choose. I got to set terms. I got to walk away on my own feet. That's all that matters. Do you think I'm cruel for not forgiving her? No, I think you're honest. He wrapped an arm around her. Forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone. It's something you give when you're ready, and maybe you never will be. That's okay too. She closed her eyes, let herself feel the weight of the ring on her finger, the warmth of Silas's arm around her, the steady rhythm of the wagon beneath them. Thank you for coming with me. Always. They rode the rest of the way in comfortable silence. When they pulled into the clearing, all 4 children came running. You're back. You came back. We thought maybe you wouldn't. Mabel climbed down from the wagon and was immediately mobbed. Arms wrapped around her legs, her waist, her neck. Voices talked over each other. Hands grabbed at her dress. She knelt down and gathered them all close. I told you I'd come back. But we were scared, Hannah whispered. I know, but I'm here and I'm not leaving. Never, Benji asked. Never. Josiah stood back, his arms crossed, but his eyes were red. You really meant it, about this being your home? I really meant it. He nodded, then uncrossed his arms and joined the hug. Silas watched from beside the wagon, his face soft with something Mabel couldn't name. That night after the children were asleep, she found him on the porch again. Thank you, she said, for everything today. You don't need to keep thanking me. I know, but I want to. She sat beside him. I've been thinking about what you said, about falling in love with me. He went very still. Mabel, I'm falling in love with you too. The words came out steady. Sure. I don't know when it started. Maybe the day you paid for me. Maybe the day you defended me in town. Maybe the day you held me while I cried. But it's there and it scares me, but not as much as the thought of leaving does. Silas turned to face her. His eyes were so intense it took her breath away. You mean that, yes, even though I've got 4 kids and a broken-down cabin and nothing to offer but trees and dirt, especially because of that. She took his hand. Because those kids need me, and this cabin needs me, and you need me, and I've spent my whole life being told I was useless, so getting to be needed, getting to matter, that's everything. He pulled her close, pressed his forehead against hers. You matter so much, it terrifies me. Good, we can be terrified together. He laughed, then kissed her, soft and slow and careful, like she was something precious. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. Marry me. The words were so simple, so unexpected. Mabel's heart stopped. What? Marry me. Make this official. Be my wife. Be their mother. Be the person who stays. Silas. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. Take your time, but know that I'm asking, and I mean it. She stared at him, at this man who'd saved her, who'd seen her when everyone else looked away, who'd given her a home and a family and a reason to keep living. Yes. He blinked. Yes. Yes, I'll marry you. You're sure? I'm terrified, but yes. He kissed her again, harder this time, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. When they finally broke apart, they were both crying. When? He asked. Soon, before I lose my nerve. Next week. Next week. They sat on the porch, holding each other, planning a future neither of them had thought possible. And inside the cabin, 4 children slept soundly, knowing that the woman who'd saved them was finally truly home. The next morning, Mabel woke to find all 4 children standing at the foot of her bed. Papa told us, Josiah said. Her heart jumped. Told you what? That you're getting married, that you're going to be our mother. For real. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. How do you feel about that? Eli grinned. I think it's about time. Hannah climbed onto the bed and wrapped her arms around Mabel's neck. Does this mean you can't leave even if you want to? I'm not leaving, marriage or not. But marriage makes it official, Benji said seriously. Right, right. Josiah stood apart, his face unreadable. What do we call you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Whatever feels right to you, Mabel said carefully. I'm not asking you to call me Mama if you're not ready. I'm not trying to replace her. But you are replacing her. His voice wasn't angry, just honest. She left. You stayed. That makes you our mother now. Josiah, I'm not mad about it. He stepped closer. I'm just saying it's true, and if we're going to do this, we should be honest about it. Mabel's throat tightened. Then be honest. How do you really feel? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, scared. Because what if you change your mind? What if one day you wake up and realize this life isn't enough? That's not going to happen. You don't know that. You're right. I don't. She held his gaze. But I can tell you this. Every morning I wake up in this house, I choose to stay. Every time one of you needs me, I choose to be there. Every time your father looks at me like I matter, I choose to believe him. And I'll keep choosing until it stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like breathing. His eyes glistened. That's all I needed to hear. He turned and walked out. The other children followed, leaving Mabel alone with the weight of promises she desperately hoped she could keep. That afternoon, Silas took her to town. They needed to file papers, make arrangements, tell the preacher. "You sure about this?" he asked as they drove. "About marrying someone like me, someone like you, someone with 4 kids and a mountain of baggage. Your baggage is nothing compared to mine. Maybe we can just combine them, have one enormous pile of mess, and call it a life." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Sounds perfect." When they reached the courthouse, the clerk looked them up and down with barely concealed judgment. "You're Silas Jennings." "Yes." "And you're the woman he bought at auction." Mabel's spine straightened. "I'm the woman he rescued, and my name is Mabel." The clerk sniffed. "I'll need documentation, proof of identity, proof she's legally able to marry." Silas pulled out the emancipation papers. "She's free. No one owns her. Not her father, not me, not anyone." The clerk read the papers, his face pinched like he'd tasted something sour. "This is highly irregular. Is it legal?" "Yes, but then file the papers. We're getting married next Saturday." The clerk stamped the documents with unnecessary force. "You'll need 2 witnesses." "We'll have them." As they left, Mabel heard the clerk mutter something about disgrace and propriety. She stopped, turned. "Excuse me." The clerk's face flushed. "I didn't." "You did, and let me be very clear. The only disgrace here is people like you who measure worth by blood and babies instead of character. So you can keep your judgment. I don't need it, and I certainly don't want it." She walked out. Silas followed, trying not to smile. "You're terrifying when you're angry." "Good. People should be scared of me." "Oh, they are. Trust me." They stopped at the general store for supplies. Mrs. Fletcher spotted them immediately. "Mabel, I heard you went to see your mother. How is she?" "Dying, but we said what needed to be said." "Oh, honey." Mrs. Fletcher pulled her into a hug. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. Some goodbyes are necessary." "Still, it must have been hard." "It was, but I'm okay." Mabel pulled back and smiled. "Actually, I'm better than okay. Silas and I are getting married." Mrs. Fletcher's eyes went wide. "Married? Oh, my stars, when?" "Next Saturday." "That's only a week away. We need to get you a dress and flowers and—" "Mrs. Fletcher, I don't need—" "Nonsense. Every bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day." She grabbed Mabel's hand and dragged her toward the fabric section. "Now, what's your favorite color?" 2 hours later, Mabel left the store with enough fabric for a new dress, a borrowed veil, and enough well-wishes to fill a wagon. Word spread fast. By evening, half the town knew. By the next morning, people were stopping by the cabin. Some came with congratulations. Others came with thinly veiled curiosity. A few came with outright hostility. "You really think marrying him makes you respectable?" one woman sneered. "Everyone knows what you are." Mabel smiled sweetly. "A woman who can cook, sew, heal wounds, kill snakes, and hold a family together. Yes, that's exactly what I am." The woman huffed and left. Silas found Mabel on the porch afterward, her hands shaking. "You okay? Why do people care so much about what I can't do instead of what I can? Because it makes them feel better about their own failures." He sat beside her. "Ignore them." "I'm trying. Try harder." He took her hand. "In a week, you'll be my wife, and they can think whatever they want. It won't change the truth." She leaned against his shoulder. "What's the truth?" "That you're the best thing that ever happened to this family, and anyone who can't see that is blind." The week passed in a blur of preparation. Mabel sewed her dress late into the night. Simple white cotton with blue embroidery at the collar and sleeves. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. The children helped. Hannah picked wild flowers. Eli and Josiah cleaned the cabin until it gleamed. Benji made a lopsided cake that collapsed in the middle, but tasted like love anyway. The night before the wedding, Mabel couldn't sleep. She lay in her cot, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the children resented her? What if Silas regretted this? A soft knock interrupted her spiral. "Mabel," Hannah's voice. "Come in, sweetheart." Hannah slipped inside and climbed onto the cot. "Are you scared?" "Terrified." "Me too." "Why are you scared?" "Because what if everything changes? What if getting married makes you different?" Mabel pulled her close. "Nothing's going to change. I'll still wake up early to make breakfast. I'll still help with homework. I'll still tuck you in at night. The only difference is I'll have a ring on my finger. And you'll be my mama. For real. For real." Hannah was quiet for a moment. Then, "I don't remember much about our real mama, just little things, the way she smelled, the songs she sang, but I remember she left, and I remember it hurt." "Oh, honey. But you're not like her. You stayed even when things got hard. You stayed when Eli got hurt. You stayed when Josiah was mean. You stayed when Papa didn't know how to ask you to." She looked up, her eyes shining. "So I'm not scared you'll leave. I'm scared you'll realize we're too much trouble." "You're not too much trouble. We are sometimes. Everyone is sometimes. But you're worth it. Really, really." Hannah snuggled closer. "I'm glad Papa found you." "Me too." They fell asleep like that. Two people who'd been broken by abandonment holding on to each other in the dark. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Mabel woke to chaos. Hannah couldn't find her good shoes. Eli spilled syrup on his only clean shirt. Benji was crying because he wanted to wear his Sunday hat, but it had a hole in it. Josiah tried to help, but only made things worse. Silas stood in the middle of it all, looking like he'd been hit by a tornado. "Maybe we should elope." Too late now. Mabel wiped syrup off Eli's sleeve. "Everyone's expecting us at the church in 2 hours. We could run, head for the mountains, live off the land, and disappoint Mrs. Fletcher after she spent 3 days baking that cake." "You make a valid point." Somehow they got everyone ready. Somehow they made it to the church on time. Somehow the day that had started in chaos settled into something almost peaceful. The church was small, plain wooden benches, simple altar, sunlight streaming through the windows. About 30 people showed up. Mrs. Fletcher and her husband, the doctor, a few neighbors, some of the men Silas worked with in the logging camp, and standing in the back looking uncomfortable but present was Samuel Barnes. Mabel's breath caught. "What's he doing here?" Silas followed her gaze. "I didn't invite him." Samuel stepped forward slowly. "I know I'm not welcome, but I had to come, to see you happy, to see you choose something for yourself." His voice cracked. "Your mother passed 2 days ago. She asked me to tell you that she was proud of you and that she hoped you'd find peace." Mabel's chest tightened. "She's gone." "Yes, peacefully, in her sleep." She didn't cry, didn't feel the crushing grief she'd expected, just a hollow ache where something used to be. "Thank you for telling me. Can I stay for the ceremony?" She looked at Silas. He squeezed her hand. "It's your choice." She turned back to her father. "You can stay, but you sit in the back. And you leave immediately after. We're not your family anymore." "I understand." He took a seat in the last pew. The ceremony was simple. The preacher spoke about love and commitment and choosing to stay when things got hard. Silas promised to honor her, protect her, and see her as an equal. Mabel promised to love his children as her own, to build a home worth staying in, and to never let fear make her choices. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, the church went silent. Then Benji's voice rang out. "I object to waiting any longer. I'm hungry." The church erupted in laughter. "Then let's finish this," the preacher said, smiling. "Silas Jennings, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Mabel Barnes, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She looked at Silas, at his tired eyes and rough hands, and the hope written across his face. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Silas pulled her close and kissed her. Not gentle, not careful, but with the kind of certainty that came from knowing you'd found something worth holding on to. The church erupted in applause. The children swarmed them. Hannah grabbed Mabel's hand. Eli whooped and threw his hat in the air. Benji jumped up and down, yelling, "We have a mama! We have a mama!" Even Josiah smiled, his eyes wet. Afterward, they gathered at the cabin for cake and coffee. Mrs. Fletcher had outdone herself. 3 layers of vanilla cake with buttercream frosting. It was almost too pretty to eat. Almost. As the sun set and the guests left, Mabel stood on the porch watching Silas chase the children around the yard. Their laughter echoed through the clearing. Samuel approached one last time. "I'll be going now." "Okay." "Mabel, His voice broke. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know that seeing you today, seeing you happy, it's the first good thing I've done in years." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd destroyed everything and was trying to live with it. "I hope you find peace too," she said quietly, "but you won't find it with me. That part of my life is over." He nodded. "Thank you for letting me come. Thank you for leaving." He walked away, climbed onto his horse, rode off without looking back. Mabel watched him disappear into the trees and felt the last chain fall away. Silas came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You all right? I'm perfect." "Liar." "Okay, I'm sad and relieved and angry and grateful all at once, but mostly I'm just glad it's over." "Your mother passing?" "Everything, the old life, the shame, the wondering if I'd ever be enough." She turned in his arms. "I'm enough here, with you, with them, and that's all I needed to know." He kissed her forehead. "You're more than enough. You're everything." That night, after the children finally settled down and the house grew quiet, Mabel and Silas made it on the porch together. "I can't believe I'm someone's wife," she said. "I can't believe I convinced someone to marry me. You didn't convince me. You just showed me what it looked like when someone saw me as human instead of damaged goods. You were never damaged." "I know that now." They sat in comfortable silence. The crickets sang. The stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. "Silas, yeah. Do you think your first wife ever regretted leaving?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but I hope she found whatever she was looking for, because her leaving made room for you to stay." "That's a generous way to look at it." "I'm not generous. I'm just tired of carrying anger." He pulled her closer. "Besides, if she hadn't left, I wouldn't have you. And I'd rather have you than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." Mabel rested her head on his shoulder. "I was ready to die, you know. Before you bought me, I'd given up." "I know." "How?" "Because I'd been there too, after she left, standing at that river wondering if drowning would hurt less than living." His voice was rough. "But the kids needed me, so I stayed. And then you came, and suddenly staying stopped feeling like an obligation and started feeling like a choice." "I'm glad you stayed." "I'm glad you did too." They sat like that until the moon rose high and the cold drove them inside. Over the next few months, life settled into a rhythm. Mabel woke before dawn, made breakfast, managed the chaos of getting 4 children ready for the day, worked in the garden, mended clothes, cooked dinner, told stories, tucked everyone in, fell into bed exhausted. But she was happy. Eli's leg healed completely. He walked with a slight limp, but it didn't slow him down. He started teaching Mabel how to chop wood, insisting she needed to know, in case something happened to Silas. Hannah bloomed. She talked more, smiled more, started helping Mabel in the kitchen, her small hands learning to knead dough and stir soup. Benji followed Mabel everywhere, chattering constantly about bugs and clouds and why the sky was blue. She answered every question with patience she didn't know she had. And Josiah. Slowly, carefully, he let his guard down, started calling her Ma instead of Mabel, started asking her opinion, started trusting that she wasn't going anywhere. One evening he found her alone in the kitchen washing dishes. "Ma, yes, thank you." She turned. "For what?" "For staying, for fighting for us, for being the mother we needed instead of the one we lost." His voice cracked. You didn't have to do any of this, but you did, and I just wanted you to know it matters." She dried her hands and pulled him into a hug. He was almost as tall as her now, growing into a man right before her eyes. "You matter to me too," she whispered. All of you. You saved me just as much as I saved you." He held on tight, then pulled away, wiping his eyes. "Don't tell the others I cried. Your secret's safe with me." Winter came hard that year. Snow piled high, wind howled through the trees. The cabin was drafty and cold, no matter how much wood they burned. But they had food. They had warmth. They had each other. One particularly brutal night, the children piled into Mabel and Silas's bed, too cold to sleep alone. They lay in a heap of arms and legs and blankets, telling stories and laughing until exhaustion won. Mabel looked around at their faces, at Hannah curled against her side, at Benji using Silas's arm as a pillow, at Eli and Josiah sprawled at the foot of the bed. "We should get a bigger bed," Silas muttered, "or smaller children." "Too late for that," Mabel smiled. "I wouldn't change a thing. Not even the part where Benji kicked you in the ribs. Not even that." He kissed her temple. "I love you. I love you too. Even with 4 kids and a drafty cabin. Especially with 4 kids and a drafty cabin." When spring finally arrived, Mabel planted a garden. Not just vegetables, flowers too. Wildflowers like the ones her grandmother used to grow. She worked the soil with her bare hands, singing the songs her grandmother had taught her. The children helped. Benji dug holes. Hannah planted seeds. Eli hauled water. Josiah built a fence to keep animals out. "Why flowers?" Eli asked. "They don't feed us." "Because beauty feeds the soul," Mabel said, "and our souls need feeding just as much as our bodies." By summer, the garden was a riot of color. Red poppies, blue cornflowers, yellow daisies. They spilled over the fence and onto the path. People started stopping by just to see them. Mrs. Fletcher brought friends. Neighbors brought their children. "This place looks different," one woman said. "Feels different. That's because it's loved." Silas said, his arm around Mabel's shoulders. "Love changes everything." One afternoon in late summer, Mabel was working in the garden when she heard horses. She looked up to see Thomas and Penelope riding toward the cabin. Her stomach dropped. "Silas." He came out immediately, axe in hand. "What do you want?" Thomas dismounted. He looked older, thinner. His face was drawn. "We came to apologize." "We don't want your apology," Silas said flatly. "Please, just hear us out." Thomas looked at Mabel. "I was wrong about everything, about judging you, about leaving you, about thinking you were less than because you couldn't have children." Penelope stepped forward, her face blotchy from crying. "I can't have children either. We just found out. And suddenly everyone's treating me the way they treated you. Like I'm worthless, like I'm broken." She sobbed, and I realized how cruel I was. How awful. "I'm so sorry." Mabel stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. She looked at Thomas, at Penelope, at these 2 people who'd mocked her and scorned her and made her feel less than human. She felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, just a hollow kind of pity. "I forgive you," she said quietly. Penelope's face crumpled with relief. Thank you so much. But I don't want you here. You had your chance to be kind, to be decent, and you chose cruelty. So take your apology and go, because I don't need it anymore." Thomas's face went pale. "Mabel, I'm not Mabel Barnes anymore. I'm Mabel Jennings, and I have a family that loves me, a husband who sees my worth, children who need me, a life that matters." She stepped closer. "So you can take your guilt and your regrets and carry them somewhere else, because I'm done carrying them for you." She turned and walked back into her garden. Thomas and Penelope stood frozen. Then they mounted their horses and left without another word. Silas came up behind her. "You're terrifying, and I love it. They deserved worse." "Probably, but you were merciful anyway." "I wasn't being merciful. I just don't have room in my life for people who make me feel small." She looked at him. I only have room for people who make me feel whole." He kissed her, long and slow and perfect. When they pulled apart, all 4 children were watching from the porch. "That was amazing," Josiah said. "What he said," Eli added. Hannah ran down and threw her arms around Mabel. "You're the best mama ever." "The absolute best," Benji echoed. Mabel held them all, her family, her home, her reason for everything. Years passed. The children grew. Josiah became a man tall and strong with his father's steady hands and his mother's fierce heart. He took over the logging work, giving Silas time to rest. Eli married a girl from town and built a cabin nearby. He and his wife visited every Sunday, bringing noise and chaos and joy. Hannah became a teacher. She taught children to read and write just like Mabel had taught her. She said she wanted to help kids feel seen the way Mabel had made her feel seen. Benji stayed. He was too attached to the land, to the trees, to the life they'd built together. He worked alongside Josiah, laughing and singing and making everyone around him smile. Mabel and Silas grew old together. Their hands became weathered, their hair turned gray, their bodies slowed, but their love never did. One evening, decades after that first auction, Mabel stood in her garden watching the sunset. Silas came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "That day when you bought me." "Rescued you." "Rescued me," she corrected with a smile. "I was so scared I thought you'd be like all the others, that you'd use me and break me and throw me away. And instead you saw me, really saw me. Not as damaged goods or a burden or something to be fixed, just as a person who needed kindness." She turned in his arms. "You gave me a life worth living. You gave us a home worth having." He touched her face. "Every single day with you has been a gift. Even the hard days, especially the hard days, because we survived them together." They stood like that as the sun dipped below the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Their children were grown. Their grandchildren played in the yard. Their life was full. And Mabel, who'd once stood on an auction block believing she was worthless, now stood in a garden she'd planted with her own hands, surrounded by a family she'd built with her own love, knowing beyond any doubt that she'd always been enough. She wasn't the woman who couldn't have children. She was the woman who'd raised 4 of them anyway. She wasn't broken, she was whole, and she was finally, completely, undeniably home.